All right, thank you. 75 now at News Radio WBEX. The Small Business Administration is in federal district court right now, thanks to a group called the American Small Business League. We have Lloyd, Lloyd, last name is?
Chapman, Lloyd Chapman.
Lloyd Chapman with us here this morning. I didn't have my notes in front of me. You are a watchdog group keeping an eye on the Small Business Administration, right?
Absolutely. The Small Business Administration manages the single largest economic stimulus program for the middle class in the history of America, which is the Small Business Act. And that law mandates that a minimum of 23% of all the money the government spends go to small businesses.
For folks who have never paid attention to this before, small business makes up a good portion of the business across America.
Absolutely. To tell you the truth, when I first saw these statistics several years ago, I was kind of surprised. So there are 28 million small businesses in America. They're responsible for half the gross domestic product, half the private sector workforce, and 90% of all U.S. exporters are small businesses. And I think the most shocking thing is over 90% of the net new jobs come from small businesses. And so the Small Business Act, again, the way I look at it is it's the largest, but it's the most efficient and effective economic stimulus program here in America. Here's a study that I'll read to you. It says businesses with fewer than 20 employees account for 90% of U.S. firms and responsible for more than 97% of all new jobs, according to a new report by the Small Business Administration. So the Small Business Administration themselves admit that small businesses create virtually all the net new jobs.
When you sit and look at this and you think to yourself, okay, that sounds hard to believe, but that is the case because so many people rely on factory jobs and things of that sort. But small businesses make up a workforce of less than 500 per business?
Well, the Census Bureau says, 98% of all U.S. firms have less than 100 employees, and about 89% have less than 20. The average American company has 10 employees.
Okay.
So I'm looking at a pie chart here I made the other day, and think about this. Visualize a pie chart in your mind, and 98% of all American companies have less than 100 employees, and just 2%, a very small slice, have more than 100 employees. And federal law mandates that largest section should get 23% of all government contracts. That means that 2% of U.S. firms are getting over 77% of all of our tax dollars. And that small sliver of 2% are not creating new jobs. And I think a lot of people have seen stories in the press how large corporations are really not paying their fair share of taxes. So we're trying to do something about that. We think that the small businesses where most Americans work should get at least the minimum amount of contracts that the law requires, but that's just not happening these days.
This plays right down the road of the federal government not making it easy on small business, and it's almost as if the federal government runs on the strength of small businesses.
Well, it's interesting. I'll tell you something. The American Small Business League is a nonpartisan organization, but when you look at government policies, they appear to be anti-small business. Here's something I'm holding in my left hand here. This is written by Professor Charles Tiefer. And Charles Tiefer was appointed by President Obama to serve on the commission to investigate wartime spending in Iraq and Afghanistan. And he's pretty much acknowledged as the number one expert in America on federal contracting law. And he wrote a legal opinion on a government policy that the GSA is going to probably be implementing in the next couple of months called the Strategic Sourcing Initiative. And here's the title of his legal opinion on that new government policy. Proposed regulations illegally authorize strategic sourcing to massively reduce the breadth of contracting with small businesses. And here's the first sentence. Proposed regulations will reduce the breadth of small business contracting by up to 80 or even 90% of lines of business where small business contracting is currently common. This proposal is blatantly and undeniably illegal. And that's a proposal that the General Services Administration proposed about a month ago.
Well, visiting this morning with President Lloyd Chapman. He is the president of the American Small Business League, a watchdog group keeping an eye on the Small Business Administration. Tell us where they're going wrong in this most recent deal. You've got an injunction against them in federal court right now.
All right. Well, federal law says that, again, 23% of all contracts go to small businesses, and the law actually says the word all of all government contracts. And the federal acquisition budget for 2015 was $1.2 trillion. But the Small Business Administration has completely fabricated a policy they call their exclusionary rule, where they actually exclude the majority of federal contracts from that percentage. So when the SBA came out last year and said the government had hit that small business goal, that just wasn't true. They used a budget that was about a third of the real budget. The other thing they did was they included hundreds of billions in contracts to Fortune 500 firms. So today, while we're talking, your government is giving federal small business contracts to Fortune 500 firms here in the U.S. and some of the biggest companies around the world, like Rolls-Royce and British Aerospace, Finmeccanica in Italy, Thales in France. And there's been a number of federal investigations. I've done this so much I've got it memorized. Here's one from the SBA Inspector General. So this is the Inspector General for the Small Business Administration said this. One of the largest challenges facing the Small Business Administration and the entire federal government today is that large businesses are receiving federal small business procurement awards and agencies are receiving credit for these awards. And every Inspector General for 11 years has reiterated that. And quite frankly, in 2008, President Obama released a statement when he was running that said it's time to end the diversion of federal small business contracts to corporate giants. So it's been well established. If your listeners go to our website, asbl.com, and click on In the News or go to lloydchapman.com, you can see dozens of stories in the mainstream media about this. It's been on every major television news channel. It's been in every major newspaper in the country for probably over a decade.
But we've merely been distracted by other things, haven't we?
Yeah. Here's something I'm going to read a line from a report from the Government Accountability Office again. So this is not me saying this. This is the Government Accountability Office talking about the SBA and a program they manage for service-disabled veterans. By failing to hold firms accountable, SBA and contracting agencies have sent a message to the contracting community that there is no punishment or consequences for committing fraud. That's the Government Accountability Office. And here's something I'll read you. I'm holding my most recent legal victory against the government in federal court, and this is Judge William Alsup in a case that I filed against the Pentagon. And this is what he said in the hearing. So it'd be more like a David and Goliath. You get to come in there and be the underdog again against the big company and against the big government. They are trying to suppress the evidence. So this is a federal judge in federal district court in San Francisco in a lawsuit that I won, accusing the United States of suppressing evidence in this lawsuit. And here's why people should care. When you look at across the country, and Ohio's indicative of America, birth rates are down for 6 consecutive years because of economic concerns. The number of people between the ages of 25 and 35 that have to move back in with their parents has never been higher. Poverty in America is at a 17-year high. Here's a story I'm looking at. Poverty rates hit 17-year high. There'll be fewer small businesses in America tomorrow than there is today, and there's fewer today than there was yesterday. Home ownership is a 19-year low. Middle-class incomes are dropping. And here's something, by the way, I actually saw Secretary Clinton on TV talking about this. The World Bank did a study about how easy it was to start a business in companies around the world. The U.S. is 49th. 49th. Behind Latvia, Kazakhstan, Afghanistan, Mongolia. It's just absolutely astounding. But again, when you think about it, it makes sense. We've got the Small Business Act administered by the SBA, the largest economic stimulus program in the history of America for the middle class, and it's essentially been repealed. and that money is being diverted to 2% of all American companies. That I saw a study from the Kauffman Foundation that said that large businesses in America haven't created one new job since 1980. So it's something that's very, very serious, but you just don't hear much about it.
Keeping an eye on the big guy for the little guy, Lloyd Chapman. Again, people can get more details at your website, which is asbl.com, correct?
That's right, and LloydChapman.com has all of our television appearances on there.
All right, Lloyd, thank you for your time, and thanks for what you're doing. And
Thank
good
you
luck
very
to you.
much. Thanks for having me.